Hello, this is Lynn Fraser with the Radical Recovery Summit. I had another opportunity to have a conversation with Prentis Hemphill, founder of the Embodiment Institute, and someone who works very closely with healing and social justice. You can't come away from this conversation without feeling inspired and hopeful and connected. Their work is deep, it's embodied, it's real people who don't have it all figured out connecting with each other. Here's our conversation. I've been involved with your work through the Embodiment Institute and the Practice Ground. I really love what you're doing in terms of, in particular, social justice and how we can care for ourselves. And the theme this year in the summit is embodied joy and connection. So, what does that spark for you? What do you think about that?
Something I've been thinking about is the how much we long to connect, and then how scary it can feel for us for so many different reasons. Um, and when we do allow ourselves, or when we are in a space that feels safe enough to sink into connection and um, vulnerability and intimacy, closeness, like really revealing ourselves and being together, I find that that's when I feel so much joy, but like a deep joy, like the joy of kind of residence of not being alone, of being accepted, of belonging. Um, so I feel really excited about that, and I think this question that I'm often holding of like, how do we move towards each other? How do we really move towards each other as we are, as we really are, and meet each other? Is one that is sometimes scary to me personally and exhilarating to think about. So that's part of what comes to me, and just joy as awe, as presence, as being um, aware of our lives and the lives around us. I think there's so much joy that's just inherent in presence that I hope we can keep moving towards and cultivating and opening up the space for ourselves and each other.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So when we're talking about that kind of joy, it's a lot deeper than pleasant experiences or happiness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which are nice.
Which are nice, yeah, for sure. So when you think about your work,
Mm-hmm.
you work in an area that's really challenging and really
Mm-hmm.
difficult. And you're a meditator
Mm-hmm.
and you bring that. How did you start to really weave in the somatic embodiment into your work with social justice and with people?
I'm kind of laughing because it's been a challenge in some ways. And there are people that come before me that have been working that connection for a long time. And so I come into a conversation, a set of practice and opening that already existed. I started studying somatics in probably 2008 or 9. An organization was doing work with a place where I worked, an organization where I worked, and we had this opportunity to do somatics, and we were doing social justice work. And I didn't at first get the connection. I was like, why would we be doing this work in the context of, our organizing or our advocacy work? And, when I first did it with my coworkers, it felt, I mean, in some ways it was really overwhelming for all of us, but it felt like a kind of crashing in of reality to realize that my history and my embodiment was always present, and it impacted how I worked with my colleagues, but it also impacted um, my vision for the world. It impacted what I thought was possible. It impacted how we went about doing the things that we were doing, how deeply we could connect, like what you're talking about,
Mm-hmm.
had so much to do with our embodiment. So that set me on a journey that just had me keep bringing those questions together. What does social change have to do with embodiment? And working with leaders and working with organizations and working inside of movements, really with that question at the center. So it's been um, exciting, tumultuous, painful, beautiful journey since then of trying to weave those things together, back together.
Do you want to talk a little bit about the Black Embodiment initiative that you're doing? And this
Yeah.
seems really directly relevant to being able to connect with each other.
Well, I want to say like it's it's been really important for me as a Black person to have spaces that felt like I could really unwind, come home to myself, let down some of the hypervigilance, let down some of the survivor's guilt that I think I and other folks have felt. Let down some of these emotional experiences and embodied experiences that I think are not unique to Black people, but the way that they end up being shaped in our bodies is specific in this context. And to
Mhm.
be able to talk about and work through and feel those specific shapings that happen to us as Black people, um, has been really important. So that's been a commitment in our work to practice in Black spaces to start to heal our relationships to ourselves, to be able to feel our bodies, to have space to do that, and also to heal our relationship to one another, which can be so impacted by systems of oppression. It's really important for me that we have those spaces, and I think it's an indicator of our well-being, but also the well-being of any ecosystem or community that we're a part of. Can Black people feel safe? I think is an important measure for all of us. Um, and we practice in multiracial spaces. That's also really important for us. But I hold in our organization this core of like, if Black people, and I think also Indigenous people, if we can feel safe enough to transform, then we are on our way.
So, some of the elements of that, a lot of it has to do with the nervous system. Can I feel safe enough to be myself? Can I feel safe enough to not be on guard all the time? Mhm.
Absolutely. I mean, I think the nervous system is an important measure for those things. I mean, it's one of the ways you measure our kind of interface with the world. Like, how much am I tending towards feeling like it's okay to be myself, and how much am I sort of in this mode of protection and danger? Um, and I think, as we learn more and more about the nervous system and how we can regulate ourselves, but also how kind of everything is co-regulation. Even when I think I'm regulating myself, I'm leaning into the support of uh, my relationship with the trees through my breath, or my relationship with the ground, um, and that we can do that in community. We can support each other through co-regulation. So we're never as individual as we think we are.
Well, in some of the ways, the nervous system, some of the patterns it brings us into might not be necessarily what we think. When I worked with an AIDS organization from the mid '80s to mid '90s, and there was so much grief because if someone got HIV at that time, they pretty much
Yeah.
always got AIDS and died.
Yeah.
There wasn't a lot of crying there, but there was a lot of anger
Mm,
at each
mm,
other. It was like personal. It wasn't.
mm.
Some of it was anger, like here I am with HIV, I'm going to die, and I'm 23.
Yeah.
It didn't come out that way often. It came out sideways.
Mhm.
It seems to me that would probably be similar across the board with this kind of organizing work, or
Yeah, I think it's true with all of us. I was writing something recently about how, this, what you're talking about, our pain in a way can seep out of us, but a lot of times it gets expressed along lines of power. Like, either it can be expressed through a kind of lateral, like, you're like me, you look like me, you are representative in a way of something like me, and it can come out towards you, or it can come out to people that and it can come out towards people who we assess as having less power than us, just have less resource to either respond or protect themselves. That power has a lot to do with how we express our disowned pain. And I think that's just another reason why social change or social justice, healing and embodiment are so intertwined, because there often is this relationship between where I feel like I can express my pain without working through it, but I can just express it, let it out. It has so much to do with who I also feel like I might have power over, or who I might have also feel um, doesn't have power in the system, or that I don't value for whatever reason. I find a deep relationship.
When we think about what's going on with, especially in the United States, there's so much polarization and
Yeah.
so much right wing anti Black hatred. Do you feel like there's a way that we're going to get through that?
I try not to predict, um, but I will say, historically, Black people in the United States function in a way as canaries in the gold mine. Like we um, are often alerting people to what is happening and what is at the root of things. And we are often the first people that things happen to. I think, along with Indigenous or Native people, we are the peoples that are first experiencing the worst of what our system is producing, and then it grows and spreads. And I think also the way our system and kind of the myths and delusions that go along with maintaining our system is that we become the scapegoat, or we have to be the cause, because it's like you've also maybe worked with families, or as a therapist I've worked with families and also a part of a family, but sometimes it's the person or the child that's saying something's wrong here,
Right.
something needs to change, that everybody's like, you're the problem, it's your fault.
Right. Yeah.
And I think the same thing is true for how, Blackness ends up playing out inside of the United States, is that we end up being scapegoated. And I think intentionally so that other folks don't look at the actual root of the problems. It's easier to kind of create a mythical quality to Blackness that allows people to blame Blackness and be afraid of Blackness and all of these things. Without actually addressing the root causes, the really systemic and um, issues I think at play in our society.
And if we're fighting with each other, we're not looking at the real issue, the real
Exactly.
who have all the money and who have all the power.
Scapegoats are really convenient, They're really
Yeah.
convenient. And I hope one day, I think the only way we could move through it is if we mature enough to let go of scapegoating, to not be as easily manipulated by easy stories that we are fed. And if we really do the work of having authentic connection with one another, I think that's the only way. And that's really hard work. It's like, are we ready to grow up? And I think we keep getting a resounding no from so many people. But, I think we just keep working and keep moving forward.
Well, and I think the communities that we're in are a bit different from what we see publicly as well. I see a lot more hope just amongst the people
Yeah,
I see and work with than I do in the news.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think every time we gather, even in the practice ground space, I feel so floored by people willing to gather and try. And that absolutely gives me hope. I'm like, oh, it's not me alone having this desire, that there are many people that are trying to reach for each other. And as long as that is true, there's hope.
Why don't you talk a bit about the practice ground? I'm sure some of the people listening are going to want to get involved. And I know we're not at the end of the interview where you're going to kind of say your website and stuff.
Yeah,
But
sure, sure.
what is the experience like for people in the practice ground?
Well, I think this is something you can answer too. And I can tell you how we're trying to also shift it. But the practice ground is our kind of online community space, and our goal inside of it is to create a place where people can gather and try to interrupt some of this flattening that can happen on the internet and social media, where we're all reaching for connection, but the way that it gets both adrenalized and commodified and performed, that we actually don't have the experience of really letting go together, being vulnerable together, opening up through this virtual space. So our what we're trying to do is see if it is possible for us to make real connections in this space and for us to do transformative work in this space. So it's our online community, our platform where we do regular practice with each other. And, as we move into the next year, I think we're trying to build out the platform so that it's our teachers, our curriculum, but it's also other leading practitioners, movement thinkers, body workers that are coming and adding to this space. And we want to keep building out the capacity for people to really connect with each other online and in person on that space and practice together and figure out how we can support that happening. So that's our big experiment of kind of socializing ourselves, practicing vulnerability, using these virtual and digital tools that we have. We hope in a way that weaves us back into relationship with each other.
Well, I like the combination of some kind of somatic grounding practice and then the small groups.
Yeah.
Which are also so helpful that you get to meet and have a body experience with somebody who's new to you, probably never meet in real life.
Yeah.
But somehow we're all there together, doing something together. And it can be really interesting to just notice how much alike we are.
Yeah.
And also, to be careful, not in the sense of I'm scared, but more in the sense of I want to be sensitive to whatever's going on. And to do that, we have to be pretty grounded ourselves. We can't be off fight, flight, freeze or something. We have to be there. Now, that is a challenge.
It is a challenge. It's a worthwhile challenge, but it is a challenge to do. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So that kind of work in a multiracial space compared to working with Black, queer, Indigenous, the BIPOC community, what's it like to be in those two different spaces?
In a way, it's always the same themes. It's just the kind of intensity, the awareness of those themes in any given scenario. So I'll say that what is always at play, even in groups where we assume or presume that we're alike, there's still power at play. There's still all of our histories at play. We may not come from the same place. All of that is there. But what I find more pronounced in multiracial spaces is the way that, so one of the things I say is that history is always trying to invade the moment if we're unaware. Mm-hmm. Because we're so trained up there is a through line for all of us between our histories and the historical forces that are at play that are, in a way, trying to permeate our tissues and our behavior. We are trained in them, even though we don't know that. So even how we relate to one another, how we listen to one another, how much we're present with one another, we don't fully understand the way a lot of that is really dictated by our training and history. Mm-hmm. And so I find in multiracial spaces, there can be a great divide. And I said with one of my teachers, we were on a panel once, and my teacher is white. We were kind of talking about this, like, in this example, Black people and white people able to arrive to the same moment? Like, that is really the question for me, is like, can we actually get present enough that we can arrive to the same place, which to me is different than, oh, I don't see race, or some kind of, that erasure of difference. But can I arrive to presence aware of my history, aware of my shaping? And can I meet you in this present moment? How much can I see the training come in, and how much can I choose actually of vulnerability and presence? And I think in multiracial spaces, there's so much history and there's so much pain that we can, and there's so much that we're unaware of, like how deep this training goes. It's not just ideas like, oh, I like these kinds of people. It's deeper than that.
Right.
So I think giving people enough space to practice with each other, actually arriving without hurting people, is the dance. Like staying in almost like a window of tolerance. Like, how much can we actually practice without it becoming a reenactment? And that's a reenactment of historical patterns. Or I'll say one more thing here is that I think wherever each of us is privileged, and I also have privilege in some places, and people have more in other places. We lose sometimes that there can be an impulse to be good, to be right, to be affirmed as good and right, to be better than, that comes along with the places that we're often privileged in society, is this stance that we want to take, or a way that we want to feel or be affirmed as good, right, better. And that is often one of the insidious ways that we forward oppression, is by having interactions where we're trying to be good, we're trying to be innocent, or the good one, or better than. And that is often a place to look, I think, for people. Like, can you get out from behind trying to pass the test to be a person with this person? And I think from that place, you can actually genuinely have a human connection and interaction.
One, as a white person, being racist is a bad person.
Right.
So there's a lot of like, if I say the wrong thing, but then we also go into that unconscious kind of conditioning around, I want you to help me make sure that I know that I'm okay, that I'm not a bad person. And that's not okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And it's the same dance. It's like, it's a take care of me, kind of coddle me thing. And I get the roots of it. And I think, again, it's like, can you step out from behind that dance of trying to be good and just be, there's this wonderful clip of Toni Morrison. I think she's being interviewed by, I don't remember his name now, but she's talking about this. Like, this is why people have this myth of superiority, because if you don't have it, you'll have to answer the question, am I any good? Like, who am I?
Mm-hmm.
Who am I really? The good, the bad, all of it. Who am I? I'm a person that sometimes can be petty, sometimes can be loving, sometimes, is, you can really see yourself when you're not scrambling to be absolved of guilt, or when you're not scrambling to be good. You can actually be a human being, and you can meet me as a human being.
One of the reasons I think that I chose this theme of joy is all of the posts that were happening through the year of queer joy.
Mm-hmm.
And it just struck me as, like, as a queer person myself, when you were talking earlier about really feeling at home and really
Yeah.
feeling like I could be myself, I had this image of me in the 80s in a disco bar with all the guys. It
I
wasn't
love
something I
that.
get a lot, but I mean, everybody was pretty happy.
Yeah, I bet.
Most people were pretty stoned as well.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure.
But what's your take on that this year? I mean, it's been so hard, especially with the trans community,
Mm-hmm.
and so many murders and so much going on there, but also all of the legislation.
Yeah.
And yet here we are, hashtag queer joy.
Yeah, I think it's really complex, and there has been an outright assault, and again, a scapegoating
Mm-hmm.
of queer and trans communities, as a distraction. I think, to turn us away from our sort of failing systems. and how that really is impacting all of us, everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, I haven't personally hashtagged anything queer joy, but I think what I get from that is the thing that I feel really clear about is that my liberation is important for the liberation of all people. And I'm not comfortable with maintaining a kind of status quo, and I'm also not comfortable with thinking of my own queerness and transness. I really believe, I don't really talk about this much, but there is for me an important spiritual component of my queer and transness, that there is meaning and there is purpose inside of who I am, all of who I am. And I think there are ways, just like a lot of communities, our communities have been almost seduced into a kind of commodification of our own identities. And we've forgotten the freedom that we bring. We've forgotten the power that we bring. And I think a lot of people that are creating these legislations understand our power. I think they understand it. They feel it. And I think it's us actually, and sometimes they get confused about how important we are, the roles that we have always occupied, the gifts that we've always brought to community. And we think about ourselves in these, like, it's still binary. It's like straight people and us. We're like the mirror opposite. I'm not, it's no, we're not. I'm not. I think I am an important part of a thriving community and ecosystem. I think my queerness and transness, whatever terms we use for it now, is an important part of a thriving ecosystem. And ecosystem that encourages people to be free and explore, to not only think about human beings as units or in their productivity and reproductivity. We keep that space open for people to understand. And I feel very joyful when I feel into the gifts that I bring that feel inherent to who I am. And I don't want to just show joy despite the conditions that people are living through, because I have fear and concern for my own family. I have fear and concern for families throughout the US. And there is an unstoppable joy and freedom that I feel because I know who I am. And I know why they're afraid of me. I know it. But my sense of who I am is bigger than their legislation, than their attacks. And I think the more we all start to understand that, the more powerful we'll be.
When we talked before, you said something about how you always had a sense of who you were and you're okay. That there was something, somehow you knew, you didn't take on the messages that you were getting. Somehow you knew your own basic humanity, your own basic goodness. Why do you think that is, or how do you think that happened? Because you grew up in Texas, right?
I did. Yep.
Yeah. A hard place to grow up as a person of color, as someone who's queer, trans, all of that.
Yeah, I had someone said to me once, they're like, "You're from Texas? You seem like the opposite of someone who would be from Texas." And I'm from a town in Texas called Grand Prairie. And I said, in a way, I'm actually exactly what comes from Texas. Because and this, I think, kind of connects to the last thing we were talking about, in that I got a lot of messages that I couldn't exist, that I wasn't, right in a million different ways. And while I could have internalized that, there's also, I think, like a way that you can go, oh, I'm free, you know, I'm
Mhm.
free. And I think I chose that route. I could have really tried to imprison myself with those unreachable standards or the shame I felt by never knowing I could never reach them. But instead, I chose to be free. I think if I had felt differently, if I'd felt like I could be in a more heterosexual box, it probably would have been a little harder for me to be free or find my way to freedom. I think it's still possible, but it would have been like, well, here's an option. You can try to be like a normal person.
Right.
But I didn't have that option. So I just was like, well,
Mm, mm,
I I said this a few times before, but like the fact of my existence is affirmation enough to me that I'm okay.
mm,
And I think a lot of us get so preoccupied with the trends of the human world, and they have real impact on our lives.
right.
Um, but, and again, I think maybe it's a spiritual element for me, but I thought the creator created me. And humans, I know from living with them and being one of them, we create a lot of confusion and story and all of that. But I was created. So to me, that's all the affirmation I needed. The human story about who's good, who's in, who's out. You look, if you open any history book, you'll see that it changes over time. So why would I invest in their stories? Why would I invest in their myths when they've been making myths forever?
That's a
So
lot of clarity.
yeah, yeah, I think, yeah, I don't know. That's just always how I felt. Kids are pretty clear. It's us that
Yeah.
confuses.
Yeah, true. And I think you make a good point about if I was close enough that I could have reached fitting in, I might have. Yeah. Yeah, there's something about just saying no to all of that. I'm not gonna get there, so I'm just gonna do my own thing.
Exactly. I think that's what happened to me. Yeah. Yeah. You accept that you're kind of strange and the weirdness in you is too strong to deny. It would be a full-time job to try to not be weird for me. So just embraced it.
I also think there's something really compelling about someone who knows who they are
Mm,
and who isn't trying to fit in.
yeah.
And, that's part of why people are attracted to you and your work is because you're real and you're not trying to make stuff up to fit in. You're not trying to, I mean, you're not confusing. You're really clear who you
Um,
teach.
thank you for that. Thank you for that. I appreciate that. I mean, I think it's why I love my work too, of because I get to see people accept themselves and be themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And when I see someone like let something go and decide to be as they are, I honestly, it is breathtaking to me. It brings me to tears right now to even talk about it. Um, and that's the work that I get to do, is to support people to go, okay, I choose to be myself in this world. I choose a kind of sovereignty that's not disconnected, but I choose to be me. It's like we're becoming free. I appreciate the reflection, and I'm not more anything than anybody else, And I feel really clear about that. I'm not special. I'm not like, I don't have it figured out. I don't know. Because when I work with people and I see them shake off something, I see that we are all as bright. There is no one that doesn't have access to that light. And that makes me feel hopeful. It makes me feel joyful. It makes me feel humble and reverent. It's the best thing in the world to be able to do that.
and that you're part of creating an environment where people feel safe enough to let that go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like all I care about. And that's kind of why I care about social change, not because I like running campaigns or organizing even, but because I want people to feel that thing. I want people to be free.
Yeah, it's the most important work there is.
I think so.
Yeah.
And nobody can really do it for you.
Right. Right. However, there are some conditions that help.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So if someone's sitting here going, "Oh, okay, I want to be free."
Yeah,
What's your
me too.
three-step plan for that?
um, if you want to be free, find a place to practice with people, which may feel like the opposite of free,
Mhm.
but it is not. Find a place to be in practice and ritual and ceremony with people and ecosystem world. Find a place to practice changing the conditions that you can. So if you can get involved in your whatever school board, if you can get involved in community organizing, if you can get involved in create a group of people that do something similar to you. Part of being free is to remember, this is why James Baldwin said that he barely met anyone that actually wanted to be free, because being free isn't being without responsibility. It's remembering that you are an actor in this world. You are an agent in this world. And that's part of healing, to feel agency again. So to be free means to change, to be able to sculpt and change the world around you so that it's more aligned with the values of your community. So maybe that's a 2-step plan, but find a healing community where
Mhm.
you can practice together, and find a place where you can take action. And to me, those things are where freedom is at.
Mhm. Mhm.
Both.
Right. And if we add in some somatic grounding, nervous system regulation, that would
It's
support
all
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 that.
somatic. Your
Yeah.
healing community
Yeah.
must be one that recognizes the body. If it is one that colonizes the body, doesn't allow the body to feel and be, then that's not the place where you want to be. You want to be a place that it centers the body and the experience of the body. Absolutely. And organizing space too. I think more and more there are organizing spaces that understand that we are alive and living and not machines. This is the time to get very clear that everything should be centered around aliveness, living,
Mm.
not the robotic, not the machine. It is time for us to do things around life. And so, yeah, all of it must be embodied.
Mhm. Well, and I think one of the reasons that I really appreciate what you're doing, like with the queer BIPOC retreat that you had, for instance,
Mm,
was just knowing that everybody who was there was going to take that experience out into their world
that's right.
and into their organizing work. And I might never have the direct benefit of what they're doing, but I love that it's there,
Yeah,
and that it's part of the seeds that are being planted, and people's sense of, I can rest here, I can have fun here
right.
with these people, I can heal, I can be free. That is so wonderful that you're doing that kind of work.
We're going to have that for everyone. Eventually we hope to do more and more of those spaces. But you're right. It's like the seed of possibility of this is possible on earth. 'Cause I think a lot of people don't feel like it's possible to feel some of the things they need to feel anywhere on earth. They don't feel
Right.
safe to feel it anywhere on earth. So having those moments to drop in to see that there's something possible that you didn't think was possible, it changes the trajectory, I think, of your life, what you create, how you relate to other people. And I want more and more people to benefit from those kinds of spaces.
Mm-hmm. So many of the people that I talk to as well are lonely and feeling so disempowered. So somehow we need to come up out of that.
Exactly.
Every person who's sitting alone in their apartment could get out and get involved with something that they care about. That would make a difference to them personally as well as to everyone.
It is where it is at. Our loneliness, our disconnection, our feeling of being disempowered, that is sort of necessary for things to continue as they are. And I know that it's not easy. It's not easy to say to someone who's, in the very depths of that, just connect with other people. I mean, I'm sure nothing could feel more terrifying than that. So, we try to create spaces where it's like you can kind of come in, practice that, feel that. But it is a repatterning of your nervous system to be able to seek that out again. But it is possible for us, and I'm happy we're doing it together.
Well, let's talk about how people could find you, reach out to you, what you offer for people.
To get involved in our work, the Embodiment Institute is the place to go. Our website, and then you can sign up for our self-guided course, join the practice ground, and start practicing with us. You can also learn more about my work, my writing, on my website, prentishempill.com. And there is a podcast situation reemerging, but there'll be more details soon on that. So just watch my website for that. I will have a book coming out June 2024. There will be a book about all of this. If you are interested, it'll be out then.
What's the title of your book?
It's called What It Takes to Heal, How Transforming Ourselves Can Change the World.
So one of the things you talk about are transformative characters.
Mm-hmm.
What's that?
Yeah, it's kind of like a way for all of us here, any of us that are like feeling activated around change, our internal change and the changing of conditions. It's a term we use to talk about who we are and what we're up to. And it's a modified term from something I read in a book about family systems some years ago. Transitional character is what they called it. And it's someone basically who comes from an abusive history and they take on doing their healing work so that those patterns don't continue into the future, into the next generation. So I'm thinking about us as transformational characters, as people who are doing our work, not only for our family histories, but also taking on our healing for the sake of not letting those traumas continue from all the systems that we're embedded in, family, community, societal, etc. So that's how we identify ourselves. And again, it's like people that are willing to grow. It's not people who have it figured out. It's just the people that are willing to try. That's the bar.
That's a pretty high bar in a way.
It is. It's kind of the highest.
Willing to try.
Yeah. But don't tell anybody, Lynn. Yeah, it's like actually the highest. Yeah.
Well, I really enjoy being part of the practice ground. I'd highly encourage people to come and get involved in that.
Thank you. And it's been nice getting to spend time with you over this last year too. So thank you for that. I know we're returning to this conversation, I think, that we had a couple of years ago, but it's just nice to be in more community with you too.
Yeah, with you for sure. Yeah, thank you. Is there any last thoughts that you'd like to say before we finish?
No, I just grateful to you for continuing to organize this space, and I hope that folks who feel moved or inspired will check us out and hopefully get in there with us, because we're just a bunch of humans trying to do the work of healing. So please join us. We need you.